Hello, my name is Cassandra Whitmore, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the shadow in my own family's story. At my father's grand event, my name wasn't even on the guest list. Imagine standing outside watching everyone else celebrated while you're erased as if you never belonged. That night, humiliation burned, but so did resolve. What no one knew was that I carried a truth stitched in silver stars earned through years of silent service. And when the moment came, 300 seals rose in unison, not for my father, not for my brother, but for me. Ma'am, your name isn't here. The words cut sharper than the salute I never got. The marble foyer held the evening like a polished mirror. Sunlight slid across tiles, brass rails kept their chill. I gave over my ID palm, steady breath measured. Petty Officer Noah Briggs scanned, frowned, scanned again. Blue light washed his face. Not listed, ma'am. Behind him, the double doors sighed. Laughter rolled out, formal and easy, the kind that assumes permission. Holidays used to sound like that, toasts for the boy who would carry the name. My glass raised by a hand no one called on. Briggs cleared his throat, patting the blow with procedure. I can call it in. You can't, I said gently. Rules are rules. I knew them better than most. Footsteps clicked, black shoes buffed to gloss. Edward Whitmore passed with a nod for the petty officer and a glance that skimmed me like reflection. He let out a small chuckle. She's not even on the list. Beyond him, Daniel came in with his wife on his arm, mess whites, bright as a spotlight. He received greetings like medals pinned in passing. Eleanor trailed a step behind. When her eyes touched mine, they flinched away, careful not to smudge the evening. Briggs's tablet chimed and dimmed. He looked up with the apology of someone made to carry a verdict. I'm sorry, ma'am. It's a strict list tonight. I know. I shifted the uniform bag. Canvas rasped, zipper teeth whispered. Inside, white fabric lay folded like a withheld sentence. I felt the cool geometry of rank through the cloth. Music swelled from the hall, a quartet easing into a march. A wall screen flickered, Edward on deck in a gale, Daniel at graduation, Daniel at sea, sun-burnished and certain. Frames changed with a confidence I recognized, history curated to fit a single spine. Briggs gestured toward a velvet rope as if it could soften the boundary. If you'd like to wait over there. I stayed where I was. Waiting had been my sport. Endurance, my lettered jacket. A cluster of officers drifted past. One looked at me, then at my empty shoulder, and looked away, satisfied by the absence. He didn't see the bag. He didn't see the years. Edward's laughter rose again from the doorway aimed at Daniel. He patted my brother's arm the way you pat a dog before opening the back door. Go on, do the thing you were bred for. Briggs tried once more. Ma'am, if I could just... It's all right, I said. You've done your job. He nodded. The light lowered, turning the foyer into a long amber runway to everything I wasn't invited to. Inside, a microphone tested, a glass rang for order, a narrative prepared to sit at the head of the table. Canvas cut into my fingers. The bag was heavier than it looked. Briggs drew himself upright. Again, ma'am. My apologies. Understood? I said. He wasn't the gate. He was the hinge. I stepped into a strip of shade where the marble stopped reflecting and started absorbing. The air cooled. The quartet's cadence tightened. The doors breathed, taking the crowd deeper into itself. I waited. I stepped aside, whispering, I've been erased before. Erasure was my family's art form. It doesn't arrive as anger. It arrives like dust in a shaft of light. The album wasn't leather and paper, it was ceremony bound in rings. In frames that mattered, I'm on a border shoulder cut by the margin, smile sinking into the gutter. Someone always needed room for a banner, a trophy, a boy with a bat. Virginia Beach summers smelled of sunscreen and hot flagpoles. On the fourth lawn, chairs lined Shore Drive while the parade stitched itself past. Daniel, all elbows and confidence, marched with Little League chin up, cap crisp. Neighbors waved like he'd been commissioned by the universe. I carried the cooler. I carried the camera. I carried silence like a second spine. When fireworks cracked the sky, the ooze belonged to him. Back home, Edward set sparklers so Daniel could write his name. The long exposure made a golden signature except my hands blurred, and Headless held the tray of matches. Thanksgiving leaned heavier. The table was a campaign map of places I set and cleared. Daniel narrated a highlight reel the winning run, the coach's praise a note from some scout. That's leadership, Edward would say, carving with a smile that suggested prophecies were being fulfilled. If I mentioned the science fair, someone needed gravy. If I mentioned debate, the oven timer rescued the room from my sentence. I learned to read what they valued and speak it only to myself. Books became reliable territory, no borders, no cropping. I solved things to hear the clean click of rightness and applause no one else could hear. When the Academy letter came, the envelope shivered against my thumb like a small stunned bird. I opened it on the porch, sea wind riffling the page. Accepted. I carried it inside as if carrying light. Edward didn't look up until the headline finished unfurling. She's smart, but not a warfighter, he muttered almost kindly. Daniel clapped my shoulder, already pivoting to a story about his captain. I kept the letter on my dresser until the edges softened. It felt like contraband proof of a border not approved by family maps. Years later, the DARPA competition. Our team wrote code that found a needle before the haystack knew it was hiding one. We won. I called home. Dinner noises, ice clinking a chair, scraping tile. That's nice, Eleanor said. Edward asked Daniel about practice. My medal lay on the counter beside a bowl of fruit until it forgot how to shine. Erasure wasn't a single wound. It was policy with gentle hands. A photo adjusted a seat, reassigned a toast, revised. Nobody shouted. The edits made less sound than a page turn. When pride got lonely, I practiced carrying my own name through rooms with no shelf. I learned to stand in a doorway and choose not to enter, to finish the work and leave credit, because work was the only thing that wouldn't leave me. Memory braids itself into the present whether you invite it or not. In the foyer tonight, the marble is the old album's margin. I watch my reflection fall into the seam between doors and understand why the glass doesn't keep me. I take out my phone to steady my breath to prove I exist in pixels no one can crop. The event feed buffers, then plays slick with captions. I look at my phone. Event slideshow shows only Edward and Daniel. I carried my truth in canvas and brass. The side lot breathed cut grass and warm gasoline. Evening pooled between cars while the officers' club glowed behind tinted glass. I killed the engine and let the quiet widen. The garment bag lay across the passenger seat, tan canvas roughed by travel corners, softened zipper teeth bright as a small horizon. It looked ordinary. What it held did not. I slid the zipper 2 inches. A sigh of cloth, the cool gleam of dress whites, pleats like meridians, starch crisp enough to score the dark. Buttons winked under the dome light, each brass eye catching a shard of my face. My fingers found the shoulder boards. 3 silver stars waited there, chill and certain, light in the hand and heavy in the world. Touch is a kind of inventory. Somalia first, a comms room that smelled of dust and hot circuits, green lines crawling a map, while a SEAL team bled minutes. We stole a satellite's attention, bent its gaze, stitched a corridor of heat where none existed. They walked out because no one saw us working. In the South Pacific, a ghost freighter carried cargo that would have taught the sea to glow. By dawn, it wore a ring of lights and new orders. No headline learned our names. The water kept its blue. I eased the coat free. It draped my lap and changed the cabin air thinner, cleaner, a pressure of expectation. Beyond the windshield, junior officers crossed the lot 2 by 2, bright voices and borrowed swagger. Their eyes slid past the car. Invisibility is louder than people think. It thuds through the ribs, a bass note without melody. The canvas creaked when I shifted the hanger. Thread had frayed along one seam. I remembered the airport where it happened, a winter layover, fluorescent light sugaring the floor while orders rerouted my sleep. The bag has traveled more faithfully than any toast. In its lining, I ferried silence home. One day, they'll stand. I tried the sentence on the inside of my mouth the way you test a bridge before crossing. Not for me, the daughter. Not for me, the afterthought. For the rank. For the work. For the lives that kept living because an unnamed hand moved a piece no one else could see. I checked the mirror. The uniform looked patient. Fabric remembers posture. It keeps the memory even when you set it down. I pictured the foyer's marble, the rope, the petty officer shaped like courtesy, the doors that breathed other people's certainty. Ritual is how you edit a room. Enter, occupy, let the facts do the talking. I ran a cloth over the buttons, slow circles that found the day's last light and trapped it. The more I polished, the more I remembered smaller operations, quieter edges, a phone that didn't ring in a mother's kitchen because we closed a circuit at Oro 312. A convoy that never rolled because the map we drew contained a road that suddenly did not exist. Each absence was a kind of presence if you knew what should have happened. Laughter drifted by in gusts. Petty resentments stirred and settled like silt. I would not enter that room to beg a seat. I would enter to restore gravity. Decision doesn't roar. It clicks. Tonight. I folded the coat back into readiness, a blade returned to sheath. The zipper drew a metal line, neat and final. My pulse evened out slower than the quartet's march leaking through the wall. I set the bag upright, palm flat against canvas, as if feeling for a heartbeat. Phone buzzes, Vice Admiral Grayson's message, commendation packet delivered. Erasure leaves fingerprints. The back corridors breathe copier, warm, coffee bitter air hushed by carpet that eats the sound of hurry. I let the door ease shut, the quartet's march reduced to a pulse through drywall. Grayson's message glowed like a pilot light proof moving toward the podium. A cart squeaked around the corner, stacked with programs and tent cards slotted like teeth. A young aide in a black blazer steered with both hands, lip pinched by the math of schedules. From the cross hall came perfume and pearls, Eleanor's silhouette, and beside her, Daniel's wife, glittering, whispering, rehearsing pride. The cart's wheel bit a seam. A blue folder slid, flapped, burst at the aide's feet. Pages skittered, white fish flashing on carpet. He dropped to his knees, flushed, grabbing at paper. I bent with him. My hand closed on a sheet before my name registered. Then it did, centered in a sentence that had already decided the evening better. If Cassandra isn't included, Daniel must shine tonight. Words leave oils like fingers. You can't scrub intent from fiber. The aide reached for the page apology, tangling his breath. It's fine, I said, eyes already reading the header reply chain, date stamps, whispering chronology. Eleanor's account. A second account forwarding. A chorus. Yes, keep it clean. Eleanor's pearls glowed in the doorway. Daniel's wife hovered, correcting a hair that didn't need correction. The aide gathered the rest, stapled edge to edge as if stitches could make secrecy whole. I let the single sheet float a fraction late, then set it atop his stack, with the neutral grace I use to return a weapon after inspection. Thanks, he breathed. Watch the seam, I said. He nodded, pushed on the blue folder, resheathed like nothing had happened. But something had. A clerical error doesn't march with must and better. If they edited the room, I would edit the record. I walked after the fading perfume, not to follow, only to measure the distance between intent and effect. The back hall elbowed toward a service door. Through its porthole, banquet staff sleeves rolled counting plates. My reflection hovered over their rhythm, a shape laid over moving light. At the corner, a framed map hung crooked. I straightened it as muscle memory straightens a picture in the war room. If a line is off a degree at the wall, it's a mile off at sea. I slipped what I had read, no studied, into my inside pocket. Paper weighs little. Its gravity occupies breath posture the way doors stop refusing. Eleanor's voice pealed and slid into laughter. She sounded relieved, as if the evening might hold now that a single beam me had been removed. I imagined the slideshow Edward on deck, Daniel at the academy, Daniel again. Down the corridor, the aide paused beside a shredder and thought better of it. A staffer murmured that the senator had taken his seat. I exhaled and let the building's cadence settle. Printers' cutlery muted shoes. The world was busy being certain about the wrong thing. By the time I reached the side exit, the sky had deepened a shade. I pushed the bar and stepped into the lot where the air held a mild honesty. My car waited, ordinary as a comma in a long sentence. I opened the door. Cooler cabin air wrapped my shoulders. I didn't sit immediately. I stood with the habit of briefings, aligning thought to action, feeling for the click of inevitability. I pull out uniform bag, lays it across the seat like a declaration. Every button was a verdict, never again. Warm yellow from the parking lamps pooled across the dashboard, soft as gauze. In this cabin, I had jurisdiction over oxygen and order. The garment bag lay open like a patient chart awaiting signatures. I slid the coat free, and the air changed salt starch, faint polished brass. Edward's sentence echoed. She's not a warfighter, and the echo met fabric made for weather I had already survived. I began with the shirt. Cotton white as a tuned blade, collar to the throat, breathe, set, fasten. Studs clicked into place, tiny gates accepting their purpose. Cuffs aligned, links threaded. Sleeves fell smooth along the bone. I could feel years of briefings settling into my wrists. Outside, the officers' club hummed with curated belonging. Inside, I took a territory no one could crop. Trousers next crease sharp enough to draw a map. Belt seated, buckle steady. Shoes, mirror-bright laces pulled until they learned restraint. I brushed a speck from the toe and remembered a hallway in Bahrain, the hour when a drone diversion became a door home for men I would never meet. The coat came last, a weight that clarified posture. I set it across my knees and studied the empty shoulder boards the way a captain studies sea state. I pinned the first star while Operation Lion Wake rose Somalia's heat, a comms room breathing green light, Lucas Kane's team counting down in a darkness that refused to be final. We pulled a satellite's gaze like a thread through a needle. The corridor appeared where there was none, and men stepped through. I pinned the second. Operation Halberd uncoiled a ghost freighter in the South Pacific, and the quiet terror of cargo that never reached shore. We coordinated nations by whisper and graph, and at sunrise the ocean looked innocent again. I held the third between finger and thumb. Not every mission can be named, but my hands remember. A map erased a road. A phone never rang at 3 a.m. A convoy turned because someone who would never be photographed redrew a line. Click. The shoulder boards were complete, a row of small moons. I stood the coat on its hanger to let the seam settle, then shrugged into it one sleeve at a time, palms pushing fabric toward fate. The lining caught my shoulders and held fast. Buttons weighted round, certain, impartial as verdicts. One by one, I closed them. With each press, I felt the civilian outline lift away, the old habit of shrinking, lose permission. My reflection steadied in the window. Not forgotten daughter. Rear Admiral Whitmore. I slid on the cover, brim eclipsing the cabin glare. Hair coiled tight beneath. The face that looked back was the face I've used in rooms with no windows. Edward's dismissal cooled to weather I could walk through without getting wet. The uniform didn't make me more than I was. It made me visible to rooms that understand only shine. Outside, a car door shut, a laugh skipped, silverware rose and fell. I tugged cuffs into alignment and checked the watch that had shared continents with me. The second hand didn't hurry. It didn't need to. I breathed like a diver when the surface is near but not necessary. My hands found the canvas bag and folded it, closed palm smoothing the last crease. They will see it. I reached for the handle, feeling the cabin's pressure change around the decision I had already made. The march threaded the wall in faint ribbons. My thumb found the latch. Yes. Door clicks open. I step into the night toward the hall. Recognition sometimes arrives in envelopes, not applause. The logistics office thrummed like a small engine printer's purring fans ticking the tired breath of fluorescent light. Boxes of programs leaned like obedient troops. A laminated map of the club curled at the corners. In the middle of it, all the event aide stood sentry over a desk, his blazer already losing its starch to the heat of tasks. A knock. The mail runner slid a clipboard forward and set down a sealed manila envelope. Across its face, partially declassified handle with care. The aide blinked, pen hovering. He signed initials neat, then weighed the envelope in his hand as though recognition had mass. He slit the seal. Air shifted. Inside, a cover note on Pentagon letterhead, concise as a drumbeat. Vice Admiral Samuel Grayson directed delivery to program chair tonight, followed by a line that functioned like a fuse. For inclusion in official acknowledgments. Beneath the note lay the packet pages, clipped clean names redacted in narrow bands of ink, and a title line that needed no music. Commendation, Rear Admiral C. Whitmore, United States Navy. The aide swallowed. In the doorway, Senator William Harkins paused, a man who could scent power from the next room. He leaned casual as a hand in a pocket. All going smoothly. Yes, sir, the aide said, and placed the cover note on top as if dressing a wound. Harkins' eyes touched the stamp, then the rank. His eyebrows rose, a calibrated click. Interesting. He lifted the top page, scanning as if speed could be discreet. Partially declassified, he murmured. He slid a tidy copy from the office machine, then slipped it into his folder between a schedule and a list. The aide read the summary twice as if repetition could make the room larger. The packet did not brag. It itemized with dates, with theater, with results that left no room for rumor. The kind of writing built to survive committees and storms. A line near the end sealed the matter. Effective date recorded. Rank confirmed. For public record as appropriate. He squared the corners against the desk. Outside, a muffled announcement called for seating. The aide pulled the evening's program binder closer, flipped to the acknowledgments tab, and hesitated. He imagined the script he'd practiced, the one without surprises, then imagined a stage that began to tilt. Procedure prefers steadiness. Integrity prefers the truth. He lifted the packet and placed it atop the binder. The printers resumed their low catechism. Somewhere in the ballroom, glass touched glass. Through the office window, he saw a slice of the podium wood polished to the color of old bourbon, a flag to the left, a microphone taut on its stand. He closed the binder with a palm that had learned to stop shaking. In the hallway, Harkins moved like weather. He spoke to a staffer, and the staffer nodded, memorizing the shape of the senator's thought. The aide tucked the binder under his arm and stepped out, the envelope sealed again, with a clip, the packet nesting where it could not be ignored. I stood at the far end of the service corridor, just another shadow acquainting itself with a wall. The aide turned, and in the second before he recognized me, as no one our eyes met. Not a question, an acknowledgement that something had entered the bloodstream of the evening. He angled toward the light. The carpets hushed his pace. I adjusted my cover by a fraction and let the air touch the white of my sleeves. The podium waited like a verdict about to be read. I see aide carrying the binder toward the podium. They toasted Daniel's battles, never the wars I fought in silence. I let my head rest against the seat back, eyes closed, breathing faint starch from my collar. The car ticked as it cooled metal, counting backward toward calm. Memory walked in with heat dust and a sky the color of brass. Somalia, 2018. Operation Lion Wake. A sand-choked upland where radio turned to snow and minutes became miles. The board showed a dead grid, comms jammed by a signal that wasn't there until it was everywhere. Our map looked polite. The truth did not. Cell confirmed, team last ping, I said, and consoles breathed back coordinates dying on the vine. Lucas Kane's voice vanished mid-sentence, cut clean, the way a wave cuts a word. A junior tech whispered we had hours at most before night forced its verdict. I watched satellites crawl like patient stars. Above the Indian Ocean, a bird we weren't supposed to touch painted a different theater. Borrow it, I said. Objections arrived, saluted, stepped aside. I laid out numbers, the arc, the latency, the blind window where nobody who mattered would be looking. We'll give it back with interest, and the room exhaled. The reroute began as code but felt like weather changing. A shift in the air said the angle had taken. My screen bloomed a heat signature like a handprint revealed by breath. 3 points clustered in a rocky throat, 2 more moving slow, one leaving a widening trail. The jamming was stubborn. We found the tower in a ravine, a crown of teeth biting the spectrum. I sent a countermeasure through a tunnel we built and felt the static soften. Lucas, if you can hear me, mark once. Static held, then clicked, one tight syllable that could have been machinery, and was to me, hallelujah. You've got a window, I said. 240 seconds. Move west by the dry wash. Do not crest. The cluster shifted, beads tugged by an invisible thread. We mapped a drone's decoy passes to misprice the sky. Hostiles looked up at the wrong angels and fired at weather. A young analyst began to cry and then didn't. Another watched the clock and whispered it backward. I didn't look away. Each second wore boots. The cluster spilled into shadow, then a seam, then the cool hollow of a wadi. Our bird returned to its theater as if it had never left. Comms cracked open. Kane, I said, and the voice that answered was human again, trimmed to bone. You saved us, he breathed. One day I'll stand for you. He didn't know my name. The call sign was enough. I nodded to a room that hadn't asked for applause. Back in the car, I opened my eyes to geometry of the windshield. Lot lights wrote moons on the hood. Inside, cutlery made weather. I adjusted my cover and let Lucas's promise settle like a hand on my shoulder from 1,000 miles away. Not all wars raise flags. Some ask you to hold a line nobody else can see and call it work. I had held it, accepting erasure as part of the uniform. The ritual in the mirror was for me. The rest would be for truth. Tonight is that day. I said it low so the night would keep the secret until it was time to speak. I pictured the corridor opening marble instead of rock, chandeliers instead of stars, and the men stepping through were not the ones I'd saved, but the ones who thought I needed saving. I checked the door, the weight of the coat, the lie of the cuffs. Readiness tightened each seam. Memory dimmed to a pilot light there when called quiet, when not. I drew one breath and placed my hand on the handle. Now. Applause erupts inside. The MC introduces Daniel as the Whitmore legacy. Exclusion leaves paper trails. The hallway behind the ballroom was a thin lung of air between laughter and labor. Catering carts idled, chrome sides slicing my reflection. Warmth from the kitchen's side. Beyond it came the practiced roar of conviviality. I stood in the seam and opened my palm. The folded slip I had picked up earlier that evening lay there, creased once, then twice, like an apology that never learned to lie flat. I smoothed it against the wainscot and lifted it to the light. Metadata, first routing path, timestamp, server hops, stacked. The header had clean geometry, SPF pass, DKIM aligned. From Admiral Whitmore to program committee private thread. Subject seating, shock recognition adjustments. Replies nested like rings in a tree. The young aide's address sat midway tentative. A coordinator asked if all immediate family officers should be recognized at the podium. Eleanor answered 6 minutes later, quick enough to be instinct. Better if Cassandra isn't included. Daniel must shine tonight. The sentence didn't raise its voice. It wore certainty the way pearls wear light. Beneath it, a second line slid intent from polite to surgical. We'll handle any awkwardness at the door. I traced the date stamp. Confirmation. Okay, not surprise footsteps. The young aide rounded the corner and stopped. His badge read, Cohen. "Ma'am," he said softly. His eyes dropped to the paper. If that's the one you found earlier?" "It is," I said. "And it's authentic." I tilted the page so he could see the chain. He leaned closer, recognized his own timid sentence, and flinched. "I thought it was just about timing," he murmured. "They kept saying the optics are choices dressed as mirrors," I said. "You handled a list. Others handled intent." He nodded, a small, grateful pain moving across his face. Past us, Eleanor drifted by with Daniel's wife, perfume crisp as new ice. Their laughter skimmed the hallway and kept going. They didn't look left. They never had. I folded the email and slid it into my pocket, where the edge kissed the lining like a blade consenting to be sheathed. Resolve is not a shout. It's a change in oxygen. My breath came steady. I studied the cart's stainless bones, the order of chafers, the military of spoons. Things with places stayed in them. I had been out of place for years. Tonight, I would assign my own. Cohen cleared his throat. "There's a packet," he said, eyes flicking toward the stage. "From Vice Admiral Grayson. They told me to put it on the binder." I said. "Thank you for not misplacing it." He flushed. "You've done your duty. Want me to notify the MC?" "No," I said. "The room will notify itself." I let the music reach me, strings sanding an old march. Behind that polish, a mic popped. I thought of every time the story had been edited around me, names missing from captions, accomplishments renamed support. Cassandra made formal and useful only when it could be cut. The page in my pocket warmed with proof. I didn't need to argue. I only needed to arrive. This time, I don't need permission. The kitchen door flapped and stilled. The MC inhaled his script. Cohen squared a stack of programs and looked briefly like a boy deciding what kind of man to be. I adjusted my cover and let the hallway's dimness return edges. My shoes found the carpet's path. The door to the main room stood ajar, admitting a fan of light that laid rank and linen across the floor. I could see the dais now, the podium's gooseneck bending like a question. Inside, Edward raises glass. "Tonight, we honor the Whitmore legacy through my son. If my story speaks to you, if you've ever felt erased the way I have, then walk with me into the next chapter. Subscribe, stay close, and don't miss what comes when silence finally breaks. Some doors open because you ask, others because you're undeniable." The chandeliers blazed overhead, their golden arcs refracting across polished marble. Every note of the quartet's anchors away threaded the air like memory sharpened into ritual. I adjusted the brim of my cover and stepped forward. The main entrance loomed tall enough for banners to hang like declarations. The foyer hummed with small conversations, clinking glasses, shined shoes pivoting on marble. The air held its own weight. It reminded me of the ritual back in the car, each button a verdict, each star a refusal to vanish. Now the decision carried me forward. I wasn't outside anymore. I was undeniable, stitched in white. Petty Officer Briggs manned the scanner. His shoulders, earlier relaxed, now squared into the shape duty demanded. He tapped the screen with fingers slightly trembling, then looked up. I held out my ID again, the same card that had been waved aside only minutes before. His scanner blinked green, a soft tone confirming access. The glow washed over us both like a private acknowledgement of what should have never been questioned. He inhaled sharply, heels clicking together. "Good evening, Admiral." His voice carried crisp and steady, but I saw the astonishment flicker in his eyes. The rank on my shoulder spoke louder than any introduction. Around us, conversations faltered. Heads tilted. Whispers gathered and broke like the tide. The uniform did the talking. Brass buttons catching chandelier, light silver stars aligned with a clarity the family had tried to blur. I walked past Briggs, his salute still firm, and let the silence ripple outward. The whispers sharpened, names floated. Whitmore. Admiral Whitmore. The sound of recognition had no volume limit, it threaded through every cluster, every pocket of laughter that thinned as I entered. The hall itself was dressed for reverence. White linens, navy banners, Portraits of past captains on mahogany walls. My steps echoed with an authority even the carpet couldn't soften. People angled their bodies unconsciously, giving me a passage I did not request. Each table I passed tilted toward me like a compass adjusting north. At the far end, Senator Harkins leaned toward an aide, his eyes sharp from decades of watching power assemble and dissolve, locked on my stars. I caught the whisper as I moved. "That's a flag officer." His words weren't for me, but they carried anyway, like a stone dropped in still water. The aide scribbled notes, nodding quickly as though history had just shifted course in front of him. I walked with neither haste nor hesitation, each step measured, each breath steady. My gaze skimmed past the slideshow projected above the stage images of Edward's command, Daniel's polished profile, a curated gallery of the Whitmore legacy. My absence was deliberate, but so was my presence now. No one moved to intercept. No one dared. I didn't need an announcement. My uniform announced itself. Anchors, away swelled to its refrain, and for a moment it felt less like background music and more like the score of revelation. I halted at the back, the full breadth of the hall stretching before me, chandeliers glowing like watchful eyes. The podium gleamed under its spotlight. My eyes fixed on it, not with longing, not with anger, but with precision. That stage was the story they'd tried to write without me. Tonight, I would rewrite it. I halt at the back, eyes fixed on the podium. Names rewrite legacies when spoken aloud. The MC shuffled pages at the podium while the quartet faded to a polite hush. He tapped the mic, found the script the room expected. Commander Daniel Whitmore, citation for meritorious service. 300 breaths moved in unison. My stars settled not as ornament, but as proof. Marcus, master of ceremonies, smoothed his voice. In recognition of exemplary leadership during joint logistics operations, Eleanor's pearls clicked. Edward sat taller. Daniel let the light hold his jawline just so. Then a voice, low but razor clean, cut the velvet. "With respect, sir, there is another Whitmore." Heads turned toward the middle row where Lucas Kane stood unblinking. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. The words moved like current through a hull. Marcus froze one hand mid-page. "I beg your pardon?" "Check the file," Lucas said. "You're missing a name." Whispers fluttered. The aide at stage right. Cohen looked suddenly smaller. Senator Harkins rose half an inch and pointed at the binder. "Read the file." Aloud. "Power knows its own verbs." Marcus flipped the leather cover, found the sealed insert partially declassified, and slid it open with a fingernail that trembled once. His eyes ran the lines, then widened the way pupils gain light when a door opens. He lifted his chin to the microphone. "By order of the Secretary of the Navy, commendation is hereby presented to..." He swallowed. "Rear Admiral Cassandra Whitmore." The syllables fell like a code entering a lock. Chandeliers paused. Boots stilled. Glass stems stopped ringing. For a heartbeat, the desert corridor returned the moment comms cracked, and a voice came back. Now it was my name, returning winged and undeniable. I watched the echo travel. It touched portraits, banners, corners where junior officers had thought themselves safe. It landed on Eleanor's pearls. They went still. It landed on Edward's posture. The nod faltered. Daniel's jaw loosened a fraction, as if the light forgot its favorite. Marcus tried to recover. Further, the citation recognizes classified operations conducted under the authority of naval intelligence. The words were careful, but the room no longer belonged to careful. Cohen slid the page closer so every line carried. Harkins folded his arms, satisfied by accuracy. In the aisle, a commander I didn't know rose to attention without orders and stayed there. Grayson's profile appeared at the back, like a cliff immovable, briefly seen. He didn't wave, didn't nod, merely existed in confirmation. The file bore his signature. The ink was a bridge. "Is it true?" the room asked without sound. The uniform answered, but truth demanded breath. My palms were dry. My spine knew its root. Lucas held my gaze. His promise was forward motion. Silence deepened until it had edges. Then, as if on a cue, nobody wrote chairs whispered backward. Not all, not yet, but enough to sound like a shoreline moving. Respect is a tide. It begins as rumor and arrives as fact. The MC breathed into the mic again. Rear Admiral Cassandra Whitmore, he repeated this time without the falter as though rehearsal were retroactive. My name traveled the ceiling and came back warmer. My father's glass lowered. My mother's hands found each other. A path opened down the center aisle as if the carpet chose to remember my feet. The weight on my shoulders did not change. What shifted was the ceiling above it. I let one beat pass, then another, so the room could hear itself. I let my fingers steady the brim firm. All heads turn as I step forward. Respect doesn't whisper, it detonates. Silence held the hall like a locked lung. Chandeliers steadied their shimmer as if even the light awaited orders. Marcus gripped the edges of the podium, his smile slipping in tiny, repairable pieces. He shuffled a page, cleared his throat, tried to pour decorum over the room. It didn't. The script had lost custody of the night. I stood at the back, the aisle narrowing toward me, the carpet learning my name, stitch by stitch. I heard the small sounds inside the hush, a cufflink tapping porcelain, a chair settling Eleanor's pearls, finding each other like teeth. Daniel's jaw worked once. My father stared at the middle distance as if that were a task assigned. Then a single chair scraped the marble with the clean authority of a drawn blade. Lucas Kane rose. The motion was unadorned battlefield simple. He turned so his voice would travel the length of the room without having to climb. Admiral Whitmore, front row. The words didn't arrive. They hit. A tremor ran the carpet. On the left, 2 seals stood automatically, bodies remembering a command that lives in the spine. On the right, 3 more. A cluster near the bar rose next, napkins falling like flags. No one shouted. Boots aligned, backs straightened. The sound was not cheering. It was a kind of weather-changing shape. Marcus fumbled the mic. Feedback squealed, then died. His lips formed a correction he couldn't find. He tried again. We proceed," with the sentence folded unfit for the new room. Harkins remained seated, but the set of his jaw blessed the shift. 1 became 10. Tables emptied with disciplined grace, not haste. Men who knew dessert and surf and the narrow math of minutes settled into one line of logic acknowledgement. I walked not quickly, not slow, counting the beats of my breath to keep the world at a human scale. The quartet lowered their instruments. The conductor's hand hovered, resigned to history. When I reached the middle of the hall, the wave had become a wall. 300 seals stood in unison. Their salute rose like a hinge, catching crisp, thunderous without sound. The air thickened. The hall acquired edges. The salutes held. Light struck brims and knuckles. In that geometry, I felt years of silence loosen their grip, 1 finger at a time. Yes. So, I returned the honor with a nod measured to the occasion, to Lucas's vow in a country of heat and silence. He held my gaze, not claiming credit, only keeping a promise. Around the perimeter, some officers wavered between standing and staying small. The younger ones cued off the seals and rose. The older ones hesitated, then stood, muscle memory outvoting pride. I felt nothing like triumph. What arrived was steadiness the world briefly restored. Marcus tried once more to steer. "Ladies and gentlemen, please, protocol." He looked to the wings for rescue and found none. Grayson didn't move. His stillness was a verdict. The aide Cohen pressed his hands on the binder as if pages could stop a tide. Lucas's voice, softer now, carried a second instruction, prayer and order at once. "Make a path." They did. The aisle widened of its own accord, chairs tucking in, shoulders angling aside without apology. I took the final steps and felt the hall walk with me. At the front row, the line opened like a door I didn't need to knock on. I stopped where tradition said, "Lineage sits," and let my hands rest lightly at my sides. The salutes held. The room wasn't loud, but it thundered with decision. Somewhere to my left, a glass tapped twice against a table, then steadied. I didn't turn. I didn't need to see Edward's face to know the math behind his eyes, curated versus incontrovertible. Eleanor's pearls had gone quiet long before. Marcus exhaled into a microphone that no longer belonged to him. Respect had detonated. What fell back were not pieces but positions. The front row waited, ready to be what it should have always been. Edward grips his glass knuckles white, unable to breathe. Legacies shift when the seats do. The front row glowed like a verdict. Lights cut clean planes across linen and mahogany. Dust hung in rank. The seals did not sit. They parted with tide logic, opening a corridor that needed no orders. I moved through without touching a chair. Boots punctuated, shoulders made grammar. The MC lifted a hand, then set it down. "Ah," he said into the mic, a hinge without a door. His other hand circled toward the empty seat in my father's row napkin. Diamonded glass centered a still life of entitlement. Marcus edged beside him. "Ladies and gentlemen, protocol welcomes the verb, broke. Welcomes." Words deserted him. I stood at the chair. Electricity hummed in the rigs. The slideshow above the dais froze on Edward in spray and sun. No one told the seals to lower their hands, so they held the salute. Eleanor's fingers rose to her pearls, then fell. Daniel's jaw retreated from its pose. My father stared at the mic as if north had shifted. The MC tried again, found only air, and gestured me down with a small circling motion. "Rear Admiral." He began and let it trail. The room had already supplied the name. I placed my cover on my lap and sat. Leather received the weight. Brim and crease aligned. Order does not ask permission. Breath returned to the room in one draft. Marcus reached for the agenda. We proceed to the presentation of commendations. He shuffled pages, searched for a root around me, found none, and read. By order of his tongue stalled. He found the declassified insert, turned one sheet too many, turned back. Words bucked. Accuracy would not rush. Harkins leaned toward the mic without touching it. "Read the file as written," he said, courtesy edged with iron. Grayson did not move. His stillness made a border. The seals eased their salutes down a completion rather than a collapse, and remained standing. Younger officers mirrored them. Along the walls, painted captains seemed to listen. Marcus's voice frayed. "Citation reads..." He swallowed. "Rear Admiral Cassandra Whitmore." My name arrived softer. He glanced up, pleading with syllables to excuse him. They did not. I folded my hands. Waiting was not resignation. It was possession. The front row felt it. The balcony felt it. Attention reorganized. My father's glass hadn't moved since the announcement. Beneath it, the ring finished. Eleanor held her chin like porcelain holds glaze. Daniel looked at his hands, uncertain what they had meant. "Proceed," Harkins said. Marcus attempted dignity. Under the glare, sweat slid. The podium reflected his jaw. He read 2 lines, stumbled abandoned flourish, and closed the binder with a careful, tiny sound. It was the sound of someone returning a tool he'd been told to borrow, not own. I exhaled through the count I used before hard orders. 1, 1,000, 2, 3. I angled my shoulders toward the dais. I wanted the frame true so I could remember this angle when smaller men tried to edit it. My father blinked weight, not acceptance. Ice clicked once. Eleanor's smile line tightened into something incapable of hosting. Daniel's wife dimmed the projection. My father's golden hours softened and resized. Rear Admiral Whitmore, Marcus said, finding the narrowest safe sentence. Honored. Not a welcome, an admission after the door opened. Grayson's shadow cut the back wall. He didn't nod. The signature on the packet had already nodded. The room loosened by degrees. The quartet's bows hovered ready to resume the score. But the page had turned. I let my cover rest. The seat did not protest. Ownership is occupying what was built for you and refusing to negotiate its measurements. The seat's leather cooled the heat under my uniform. The weight settled exact and earned. Out in the rows, metals winked and then went still like witnesses deciding to tell the whole truth. For once, I did not translate myself into smaller terms. I occupied and the room adjusted to scale. The map redrew. Harkin's whispers to aid history just rewrote itself tonight. When truth enters, rehearsed stories crumble. The podium's lacquer reflected Marcus in fragments. He tried to steady his voice and found it slipping off the words. By order of, he began again, and the sentence went thin a wire that wouldn't hold weight. The hall waited a single-held breath. Chandeliers combed the room, but light could not mend what was torn. I stepped from the front row and crossed the final distance. Salutes completed, the seals remained standing a railing I did not need. Marcus looked at me as if I were a correction, written in the margin in a hand he recognized and feared. He half surrendered the microphone, then kept his fingers. I set my cover on the lectern, reached into my inner pocket, and drew out the folded email. The creases found light. I smoothed it once on the wood, then laid it beside the binder where the ink could meet light. Senator Harkins leaned forward, eyes narrowing with the precision of a signature line. He did not touch it. He read the header, the thread, the sentence of decision. Murmurs rippled outward. Marcus cleared his throat, failed to reclaim the mic. Sweat climbed his temple, then paused. He tried a smile. Not this one. This came from the planning thread, I said. From Admiral Whitmore. I let the words rest where they fell, plain and heavy. Better if Cassandra isn't included. Daniel must shine tonight. We'll handle any awkwardness at the door. Ice surrendered in my father's glass. He held it very still. Eleanor's hand rose toward her pearls and stopped, a gesture between habit and admission. Harkins lifted 2 fingers toward the MC permission. Enter it into the record, he said. The aide paled and slid a sheet from the binder copying subject, date, sender, recipients. Partially declassified, he added, glancing to Grayson. I turned to Edward. He had taught rooms to arrange themselves. Tonight the room looked back. You erased me? I said, each word an even stone, but you couldn't erase the truth. For a breath, the club remembered portraits, hearing flags, listening. Marcus found his voice to try a different narrative. There must be context oversights. The sentence tripped. There is context, I said. Years of it. Let that ledger stand beside the page. But we will begin with the words on the paper because words make doors and locks. Murmurs grew. In the 3rd row, a captain stood and pressed his lips, thin apology unsummoned. The quartet's bows hovered. No one played. Read it, Harkins said to Marcus. No grandstanding, just daylight. Marcus read. He stumbled at my name, then at isn't. The microphone carried each hesitation like evidence. I faced the hall. You have witnesses, I said. You have the text. You have the result. I glanced toward the entrance, remembering the petty officer made instrument of someone else's decision. There will be remedies. Tonight we start with clarity. Edward's gaze tried to find a wall that would arrange itself around him. Tonight walls told the truth. Eleanor looked at the paper as if it might unwrite itself if she refused to blink. Grayson remained a silhouette of consequence. The signature had redrawn the map. The email pinned coordinates. The hall did not applaud, now seen. The rehearsed story reached its edge. The new one had a first sentence. Edward's hand trembles. Eleanor's tears spill silently. Recognition isn't applause, it's placement. 6 months later, the ocean smelled the same salt through pines over Whitmore shingles. I parked at the curb where the flag still lifted and fell like a measured breath. The front steps knew my weight again. The bell chimed. Eleanor opened with a careful smile. Back, she said, as if the word were a truce. Home, I answered. The syllable fit better than it used to. We stood in the foyer. Gulls echoed. Edward's voice carried from the living room with a cloth on glass. When I stepped inside, the first change was not the air but its arrangement. The cabinet had grown. Dark cherry new, flanked by lamps that made the wood warmer than memory. Metals ran in ordered constellations, brass aligned into biographies. At the center, fixed as a compass point, my distinguished service medal held the light. The small brass plaque beneath it spoke in present tense, Rear Admiral Cassandra Whitmore, Intelligence Command Valor Beyond Applause. It finally looked fully honest. Edward was polishing the glass, not fussing, not performing. Care with ballast. He finished a slow circle, set the cloth across his palm, and turned toward me with the look of a man who had addressed a room and now faced the person in it. "Time for a better map," he said. The old arrangement left entire coasts blank. I let the line sit. "You redrew the legend." He almost smiled. I corrected it. The word landed with weight. "I don't expect you to accept apology as currency," I said. "Not today." I stepped closer. The medal's ribbon held its color like a word that refuses to fade. On either side, his Vietnam bars and my brother's unit citations. Proportion had arrived. It looked simple the way hard things look after they're done. Eleanor came to stand beside him, hands unclasped, posture of someone learning a new language by speaking it. We should have made space sooner. I mistook quiet for absence. "Quiet is a choice," I said. "This," I nodded to the cabinet, "is a different choice." Edward's shoulders eased. It's time the cabinet told the whole story. He didn't whisper to the glass. He said it to me, and the air adjusted. We sat. No speeches. The house made its accustomed noises, a settling beam, the faint tick of the mantel clock, a kettle near boil. I told them what unclassified life allows: long hours, a successful rotation, a crew that did its work with honor. Eleanor brought lemon cake, too sweet, still perfect on the old blue plates for birthdays and truces. For the first time in years, it held. Edward asked how the benches were holding up at the academy. I asked him if the porch swing still creaked at the third chain. He nodded. We were not equal in history, but the present found symmetry. I rose before the light turned orange. The sea had moved a shade closer. The tide did its job. In the doorway I paused and let my eyes return to the cabinet. Placement more than praise teaches truth. Footsteps slowed, then stopped. Marcus stood in the threshold, taller than last time, or perhaps only straighter. He looked at the cabinet first. His gaze rested on the center, then found me. For once, his jaw had no assignment. "I came to see if you were here," he said. The words were plain. "I am." He nodded, swallowed his prepared speech, and took one careful breath, the kind before stepping onto a moving deck. The house waited. He stepped closer, palms open, a small surrender. "I feared being second. I'm sorry. Justice isn't thunder. It's the silence after erasure ends." Dusk found the porch, keeping its temperature the way old wood remembers. The flag lifted and fell like a slow breath. Beyond dunes, waves folded without spectacle still. We sat in the swing that always creaked on the third chain, letting hush be the first correct word of the night. So. Marcus watched the yard like a chart, not a stage. He didn't reach for explanation or rank. "I mistook spotlight for purpose," he said finally. "Your work taught me the difference. Respect, not rivalry." His hands rested open, relieved of assignment. "I asked nothing you didn't already owe yourself," I said. "Stand where you earn it and let others stand where they have." He nodded. The motion missed no lesson. Inside, I could see Eleanor through the doorway, small against the cabinet glass. She pressed her fingertips to the metal at the center and whispered a prayer I did not need to hear. Some devotions travel without sound. She wasn't asking me to be different. She was asking to remember correctly. A breeze threaded the yard, moving salt and lemon from cake we hadn't finished. The light brushed the swing chains into thin, bright lines. In the kitchen, water reached a boil and chose quiet. This is what aftermath sounds like when no one is revising it. Edward stepped onto the porch, shoes soft against the plank. He didn't clear his throat. He didn't rehearse. He stood where lamplight ended and gray softly began and found the register he had missed. "You made the Navy proud," he said, voice low, not for secrecy, but exact. "You made me proud too. I let the words stand on their own. They needed space, not help, so." "Thank you," I said, and felt the years loosen like knots taught how rope lies. We did not hug or stage anything for the porch lamp now. He looked past the yard toward the darker line where ocean becomes certainty, and nodded not to me, but to the fact of it. Eleanor joined him and slipped her hand into his. No pageantry, just correction, laid neatly over the years. From the swing, our reflections met in the window, a family size to the room it actually had. Marcus Rose touched the porch post like a bulkhead before deployment and smiled with no theater in it. "I'll learn the quiet parts," he said. "I should have started earlier." "There's time," I said. "The work isn't loud, it's steady." The flag lifted again, then settled. A gull arrowed low, decided against the yard, and kept going. Night assembled star by star, the slow math of distance becoming a map you can trust. The porch lamp clicked once, agreeing to be small kind. The sky kept its promise. Not silver, not stitched, real stars. Inside a clock, ticked with slow patience. I stood and crossed the boards to the doorway, and the wood made its old, honest sound. On the cabinet glass, small lights lay like a tide that knows its place. A life correctly placed requires less argument. Back on the swing, I listened to the ocean keep its promise to return. I thought of Grayson's signature, Lucas's vow, the petty officer at the gate, the chair that learned my weight. No thunder now, at last. Only the long, even draft of a house that truly lets you breathe without checking who's watching. Life will hand you moments when silence feels safer, when speaking might risk rejection. I learned that waiting for others to validate you can be another form of surrender. My advice is simple. Build your worth in the work itself, because integrity never lies. Recognition may arrive late, but it comes with greater weight. Don't measure yourself only through applause. Measure yourself by persistence, resilience, and the quiet knowledge that you kept faith with your purpose. Carry your truth like a medal, even if no one salutes. You'll know you've already won.